from the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day. Radio Pilipinas World Service can also be heard on shortwave broadcast through the shortwave facilities of the United States Agency for Global Media or Voice of America on the following shortwave frequencies: 15.640 MHz, 17.750 MHz, and 21.720 MHz. I'm your host, Leo Magpayo, and this is Dateline Malacañang. Motorists are set to get major relief this week as Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. announced over the weekend a huge fuel price rollback amounting to 24 pesos and 94 centavos per liter of diesel, 3 pesos and 41 centavos for gasoline, and 2 pesos for kerosene. In a video message, the president said the latest cuts are bigger than last week's rollback, signaling what he described as ginhawa for Filipino consumers. President Marcos also issued a direct call to oil companies: implement the rollback in full, correctly, and without delay. The chief executive urged the public to immediately report any violations to the Office of the President or the Department of Energy for swift action. Government relief efforts for the transport sector will continue, including the 10 peso fuel discount for public utility vehicles or PUVs and buses, and the ongoing service contracting program for drivers. The President added that the Land Transportation Office, or LTO, has approved a 3-month extension for expiring driver's licenses, student permits, conductor's licenses, and vehicle registrations. If a license or registration expires this month, it will remain valid until July with no fines or surcharges. President Marcos said the government understands the challenges facing Filipino households and vowed continued action to ensure that relief reaches the public.
Sa susunod po na linggo, may mas malaking bawas sa presyo ng langis. Dahil dito, bababa ang diesel ng humigit kumulang 24 pesos at 94 centavos kada litro. Ang gasolina naman ay 3 pesos 41 centavos at ang kerosene ay 2 piso. Mas malaki ito kaysa sa rollback nung nakaraang linggo at malinaw ang ibig sabihin nito para sa ating lahat. May ginhawang parating. At sa ating mga oil company, malinaw naman ang aking panawagan. Ipatupad ninyo ang rollback ng buo, tama at walang pagkaantala. Ibigay ninyo sa taong bayan ang dapat naman na nasa kanila. At para sa ating mga kababayan, bukas ang ating tanggapan at ang Department of Energy para sa inyong mga reklamo. Kung may paglabag, ipaalam po ninyo sa amin. Kikilos kami kagad. Tuloy-tuloy pa rin ang pagbibigay natin ng 10 pesos fuel discount para sa mga PUV at para sa mga bus. At tuloy din ang service contracting program para sa mga PUV driver. Ang bawat sentimo na ibinababa ay dapat maramdaman ng bawat Pilipino. Alam naman namin kung gaano kahalaga ang oras ng bawat kababayan natin. Ang bawat oras natin ay dapat ginugugol sa ating pamilya, sa eskwela, sa trabaho, hindi po sa nakapila. Ipapatupad din ng Department of Transportation at Land Transportation Office ang 3 buwang extension para sa validity ng mga nag-expire na lisensya, student permit at rehistro ng sasakyan. Halimbawa, kung mag-expire na yung buwan ang rehistro mo, magiging valid pa rin yan hanggang July at wala kang babayarang multa o anumang surcharge. Bukod sa driver's license at sa rehistro, extended din ang validity ng mga student permit at ang mga conductor's license. Batid namin ang sitwasyon ng bawat Pilipino sa panahong ito. Hindi tayo titigil, hindi tayo uurong, at hindi nating hahayaan na ang ginhawang ito ay hindi po makarating sa taong bayan.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Dateline Malacañang.
The office of the Philippine President has distributed hundreds of kilos of free vegetables from Benguet to communities across Metro Manila. The supplies were purchased during President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.'s visit to the La Trinidad Vegetable Trading Post and the Benguet Agri-Pinoy Trading Center on Friday, and immediately turned over to various local governments. Quezon City and Pasay City were among the first recipients, with deliveries brought to Quezon City Hall and the Philippine School for the Blind for distribution to residents. In Pasay, Mayor Emil Calixto Rubiano thanked the President, saying the vegetables will go to families identified as most in need. Additional deliveries were made to Caloocan City Hall North, Navotas Convention Center, and Barangay Potrero Hall in Malabon. Malacañang also listed other drop-off points, including the Department of Social Welfare and Development or DSWD, National Capital Region or NCR office in Bagobantay, the DSWD Walang Gutom Kitchen in Pasay, the new Bilibid Prison in Muntinlupa, the Manila City Jail, and the Delpan Sports Complex in Manila. The initiative forms part of the national government's continuing effort to provide food assistance while supporting farmers by sourcing produce directly from agricultural hubs like Benguet.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. spent last week leading a series of government actions addressing rising global fuel prices, food affordability, and ongoing disinformation about his health. Malacañang rolled out fiscal and supply-side measures, including the signing of Executive Order or EO 114 suspending excise taxes on liquefied petroleum gas or LPG and kerosene for 3 months. The move followed recommendations from the Development Budget Coordination Committee or DBCC after crude prices breached the trigger level under Republic Act or RA 12316. The suspension is expected to lower household energy costs and will be reviewed monthly. The administration maintained that value-added tax or VAT on petroleum products will stay in place, with officials noting that revenues fund subsidies and assistance programs. Fuel relief efforts continued through the 10 peso per liter subsidy for affected sectors, service contracting for transport workers, and fare discounts for commuters. On food security, the President ordered tariff reductions on select imported items with safeguards for local producers, alongside steps to cut logistics costs such as lowering port fees and waiving toll charges for vegetable trucks. He also led rice subsidy distribution in Manila and inspected the Benguet Agri-Pinoy Trading Center to assess the impact of fuel costs on vegetable supply. President Marcos launched nationwide reintegration services for returning overseas Filipino workers or OFWs in Tacloban City, with government data showing more than 5,400 OFWs and dependents have returned amid tensions in the Middle East. The chief executive also announced the arrest of former lawmaker Zaldico, who faces graft and malversation charges linked to alleged irregularities in flood control projects. Coordination with Czech authorities is ongoing. In diplomatic engagements, President Marcos received the Omani ambassador and accepted the credentials of 6 non-resident ambassadors with discussions centered on bilateral cooperation. The Philippine president addressed rumors about his health, saying he remains fit and continues to perform official duties. Meanwhile, the Presidential Communications Office filed legal action against several social media accounts accused of spreading false information about his condition.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. is set to visit the Araneta Center bus terminal in Cubao this Monday morning, April 20th, to personally inspect the implementation of the government's service contracting program under the Department of Transportation or DOTR. The President will be joined by Transportation Acting Secretary Giovanni Lopez and Land Transportation Franchising and Regulatory Board or LTFRB Chairperson Vigor Mendoza as they assess how the program is being carried out on the ground, particularly in one of Metro Manila's busiest transport hubs. Under the service contracting program, operators and drivers are compensated between 40 and 100 pesos per kilometer, depending on the route classification. The system ensures that drivers earn based on service delivery rather than passenger load, allowing them to maintain income even during off-peak hours or when vehicles are not filled to capacity. Officials have said the program is designed to stabilize earnings, improve service reliability, and support transport workers amid fluctuating fuel prices. Following the inspection in Cubao, President Marcos will proceed to Elliptical Road in Barangay Central, Quezon City. There, President Marcos will lead the distribution of cash relief assistance to Transport Network Vehicle Service or TNVS drivers as part of the government's broader support package for the transport sector.
Dateline Malacañang.
Meanwhile, Malacañang said that proposals to repeal the oil deregulation law must undergo careful study to fully assess their impact on the economy and on consumers amid rising fuel prices. In a press briefing in Iloilo City, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said the administration is open to all recommendations intended to ease the burden of the public. However, she emphasized that major policy changes, especially those affecting the energy sector, require a comprehensive evaluation. Castro noted that while the intent behind calls for reform is to help consumers, policymakers must also consider potential unintended consequences on the oil industry and other affected sectors. She stressed that any move to repeal the law ultimately lies with Congress, adding that lawmakers must weigh the broader implications on national stability and industry sustainability. According to Castro, the government supports policy directions that protect public welfare while ensuring that the energy sector remains viable. Calls to revisit or repeal the oil deregulation law have grown amid rising fuel costs. President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. earlier said the government is focused on long-term solutions to address energy challenges, acknowledging that amending or repealing the law would take time.
With regard to oil deregulation law, sinabi po natin na lahat po ng suggestion ay welcome. Nothing is off the table. Pero mas maganda rin po talaga na maaral ito, lalong-lalo na ng mga mababatas dahil ang repeal naman po ng oil deregulation law ay nasa kamay po ng Kongreso. But mas maganda po na mas maaral ito para makita natin kung anong epekto nito sa stakeholders, sa bansa, at sa ating mga kababayan. Dapat kung magkakaroon man ng repeal ng isang batas, dapat ito ay pangkalahatang pangkaginhawahan. Dahil kung ito naman din po ay magdudulot ng negatibo sa mga oil industries, hindi rin po ito magiging maganda sa ating bansa. So dapat itong pag-aralan para kung ano yung mas makakabuti sa ating lahat at sa bansa, yun ang dapat na manaig.
I was Palace Press Officer Claire Castro.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Philippines urged the international community to scale up support for job creation, development financing, and climate resilience as developing economies face growing pressure from geopolitical tensions and climate-related risks. Speaking at the Intergovernmental Group of 24 or G24 Ministers and Governors meeting, Finance Secretary Frederick Go said overlapping global challenges are tightening fiscal space and limiting countries' abilities to respond effectively. In a statement released Sunday, he stressed the need for more flexible and expanded financing, including budget support and emergency funding tools to help economies absorb external shocks while sustaining essential services. Go also called for stronger mobilization of private capital to boost investments in infrastructure, energy transition, and digital services, sectors he said are critical for job generation and long-term economic growth. He emphasized that human capital development must remain a priority to ensure that reforms translate into quality employment and improved livelihoods. The finance chief highlighted the urgency of enhancing climate and disaster resilience, particularly for vulnerable countries like the Philippines. He pushed for improved access to climate financing and technical assistance to help nations adapt to increasingly severe weather events. He also urged renewed multilateral cooperation to strengthen the global financial system and support inclusive, sustainable development. The G24 is a coalition of developing countries that coordinates positions on international monetary and development issues and advocates reforms to promote financial stability and equitable growth.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Philippines has called on the World Bank to strengthen global crisis preparedness and disaster response mechanisms as many countries continue to face economic and security pressures stemming from tensions in the Middle East. Finance Secretary Frederick Go made the appeal during the EDS 15 constituency meeting held on the sidelines of the International Monetary Fund or IMF World Bank spring meetings in Washington, D.C. Go said countries need greater access to disaster risk financing programs, which can be activated quickly during emergencies. He cited the impact of the conflict in the Middle East, which has pushed up fuel prices and dampened investment activity as an example of how external shocks can disrupt economies. He also urged the World Bank to speed up its internal processes to ensure faster approval and release of assistance during crisis, allowing governments to respond more effectively to natural disasters and sudden economic disruptions. Among the Philippines' key requests were affordable lending options to support middle-income earners and broader access to blended financing, which combines loans, grants, guarantees, and technical assistance to help countries manage risks and fund development programs. The Philippines reaffirmed its support for the World Bank's efforts to promote job protection, reduce poverty, and strengthen climate action, priorities that have become even more urgent as global tensions continue to affect the world economy.
Dateline Malacañang.
Philippine Department of Migrant Workers or DMW Secretary Hans Leo delivered a message inside the Cebu Capital Social Hall in Cebu City where the Bayanihan para sa Balikbayang Manggagawa National Reintegration Network or NRN local and overseas job fair and Kumustahan with the Anti-Illegal Recruitment and Trafficking in Persons campaign was held. Secretary Kaknak reported that as of 2 in the afternoon on April 19th, a total of 51 applicants had been hired on the spot, including 2 repatriated overseas Filipino workers or OFWs from the Middle East who immediately secured new employment during the fair. Around 1,500 job seekers arrived at the Cebu capital, among them 264 former OFWs, including 36 repatriated workers hoping to restart their livelihoods. The Secretary thanked 20 national government agencies, 13 licensed recruitment agencies, and 26 local job providers for partnering with the DMW and Overseas Workers Welfare Administration or OWA in mounting Sunday's job fair. Joining Secretary Kakdak in Cebu were Undersecretary Bernard Olalia and Assistant Secretary Francis de Guzman. They were welcomed by Cebu Governor Pamela Baricuatro and DMW Region 7 Director Jordan Lucero, who both expressed support for reintegration and employment programs for returning and repatriated Filipino workers.
Kayo po ang patay talaga ng aming mga servisyon programa. Ang ating mahal na Pangulo, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., ang nag-utos, ang nag-direct po sa amin, sa inyo pong mga 1,500 job seekers, including 260 former OFWs and 36 repatriated kababayans na amin po kayong paglilingkuran. This effort was made possible through the collaboration of 20 National Reintegration Network partner agencies. Ayan pa ho, ang isang utos ng Pangulo. Bukod sa tulungan kayo, mga mahal naming OFW, sabi ng Pangulo, magbubuklod po kami, magkakaisa kami mga government agencies. And for today, we have 20 National Reintegration Network government agencies here, 13 licensed recruitment agencies, and 26 local job providers. Kanina po, na-meet na namin yung worker na nakahanap ng trabaho. No, parang front desk work siya, as I understand it, sa isang establishmento dito sa Cebu City. So maraming salamat po kasi yung ekonomiya nyo dito sa Cebu ay handang-handang tanggapin muli ang ating mga repatriates. These are just not numbers. They represent lives being rebuilt and futures being reshaped. Today is not just about jobs or pagbuli, pagtulong, or pagtabang. It's also about your return, your heartful return dito sa inyong mahal na lalawigan ng Cebu. We have seen today how government and partners can come together, offering not only employment but real pathways to reintegration, protection, and dignity.
That was Migrant Workers Secretary Hans Leo Kakdak.
Dateline Malacañang.
And finally, 22 overseas Filipino workers or OFWs from Israel are now safely back in the Philippines after arriving on a commercial flight on Saturday. The group includes 18 caregivers and 4 hotel workers who opted to return home amid ongoing tensions in the region. Before boarding their flight, the OFWs were transported from Israel to Egypt, where the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration or OWA assisted them in securing commercial seats for their trip back to Manila. Upon arrival, they were welcomed by representatives from the OWA, the Department of Migrant Workers or DMW, and the Department of Social Welfare and Development or DSWD, who immediately provided initial assistance and conducted welfare checks. The government has also prepared a full suite of reintegration programs, including Technical Education and Skills Development Authority or TESDA training, government-to-government overseas employment opportunities, livelihood assistance, and medical support to help the returnees rebuild and transition as they plan their next steps.
Dateline Malacañang.
Before we conclude our program, Radyo Pilipinas World Service of the Presidential Broadcast Service can be heard over the following shortwave frequencies: 15.640 MHz, 17.750 MHz, and 21.720 MHz. Radyo Pilipinas World Service is also live on audio streaming. Just download Evox PBS Receiver on your Google Play Store or the App Store from your Apple phone. You can also visit our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Just type in and search for Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Kindly subscribe, like, and share our posts as well. And that concludes this edition of Dateline Malacañang. For Radyo Pilipinas World Service, this is Leo Magpayo. Good day and stay safe.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.